The world's most powerful bank just got a new boss, but nobody exactly knows what he owns or who he really answers to.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be here. We have a lot to unpack today.
We really do. So today we are unpacking the incredibly tense Senate confirmation of Kevin Warsh, the newly minted chair of the Federal Reserve in 2026.
And we're pulling from a massive stack of source material for this. Oh, absolutely massive. We've got official Senate Banking Committee Q&A transcripts, market data from NetDania, financial reports from Benzinga, and just a ton of press releases flying from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Right, and the rhetoric in these documents is highly charged. You have Senator Elizabeth Warren launching these fiery attacks on Warsh, and then President Trump fiercely defending his nominee.
Exactly. And I want to make something crystal clear to you, the listener, right up front. Our goal here isn't to take a political side. We are not endorsing the left-wing or the right-wing viewpoints in these documents. We are just stripping all that spin away.
Right, we are just looking at the fact.
Yeah. We are strictly following the money, the legal arguments, and the market data. We want to figure out what this leadership change actually means for the independence of the U.S. economy and, for your wallet.
Because the market is already reacting to this shift. I mean, the data we are seeing reflects a massive amount of anxiety right now.
Let's hit the ground running with a rapid-fire look at where the numbers stand. So Kevin Warsh just barely squeezed through the Senate with a 54 to 45 vote margin.
Barely.
Right. He officially replaces Jerome Powell. And financial markets immediately started oscillating. I mean, we had a phenomenal run recently. The S&P 500 is up 8.54%, and the NASDAQ is up 13.63% this year.
But then stocks recently took a sharp, aggressive dive.
Yeah, we are looking at a brutal cocktail of economic pressures here. Inflation is ticking back up. Crude oil prices are spiking violently because of a new blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is huge.
It's massive. And layered on top of those global crises, we have profound monetary policy confusion right here at home.
And that policy confusion, I mean, that is the central friction point of Warsh's confirmation.
How so?
Well, Wall Street looks at the rising inflation data, right? And they anticipate the Federal Reserve will hike interest rates to cool the economy down. That's the standard move.
Sure.
However, Kevin Warsh and the Trump administration have strongly signaled a desire to cut interest rates instead.
And the market hates a disconnect between economic data and central bank signaling.
They despise it, yeah.
So to understand why this disconnect exists, we have to kind of look under the hood of Warsh's fundamentally different philosophy on how the Federal Reserve operates.
Right, because historically, the Fed acts as an institutional shield. It exists entirely outside the political machinery.
Right, like a president cannot simply order the Fed to lower interest rates to juice the economy before an election.
Exactly, because artificial stimulation like that usually triggers runaway inflation down the road. The whole system relies on the Fed chair basically ignoring the Oval Office.
But Warsh is proposing a completely altered framework.
Yeah, he introduced a concept during his hearings that he calls bifurcating the Fed's independence.
Bifurcating, so splitting it in two.
Right. He pledged his absolute autonomy when setting monetary policy. So the actual mathematics of raising or lowering the federal funds rate.
Okay, so he's independent there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the Federal Reserve holds a second, equally massive power, which is supervising and regulating the largest banks in the country.
Okay.
And for those regulatory duties, Warsh argues the Fed should yield, and this is his phrase, special deference to the president and Congress. He envisions a collaborative relationship with the administration on banking rules.
Wait, so it's kind of like a referee who demands absolute control over blowing the whistle on the field, but then lets the team owners decide what actually counts as a foul during the timeouts?
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
Because if the owners suddenly decree that tackling the goalie is perfectly legal, possessing the whistle doesn't really matter anymore, right?
Exactly. Bank regulation directly affects the economy. If the White House pressures the Fed to lower capital reserve requirements...
Which means banks can lend out far more cash than they actually hold in the vault.
Right. That floods the market with cheap money. That stimulates the economy and drives up inflation just as effectively as cutting interest rates would.
And Senator Elizabeth Warren keyed in on that exact mechanism.
Oh, she went right for it.
Mm-hmm.
She fiercely criticized this bifurcated setup. She actually labeled Warsh a sock puppet for President Trump.
A sock puppet?
Yeah.
Wow.
Her argument is that splitting the Fed's duties is basically a Trojan horse. By allowing the administration to dictate bank supervision, the White House essentially gains backdoor control over the money supply.
They bypass the traditional firewall.
Exactly.
So we have to look at how this philosophy of special deference holds up when the White House actively targets the Fed. Because the friction recently has been unprecedented.
Truly unprecedented. President Trump reportedly attempted to fire sitting Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
Right. And the Department of Justice initiated a criminal probe against the previous Fed chair, Jerome Powell.
Which is wild. So when lawmakers pressed Warsh during his confirmation hearings, they asked him point blank if these aggressive executive actions threaten the institution's independence.
And what did he say?
He dodged. He reverted to a very careful legal defense, stating it would be inappropriate to weigh in on pending litigation.
Of course.
He repeatedly used the phrase that the Fed needs to stay in its lane.
Stay in its lane. Okay. But lawmakers pushed harder. Right.
Yeah, they challenged Warsh to name a single economic policy area where he actively disagreed with President Trump, just to demonstrate his willingness to break ranks.
And he wouldn't do it.
No. He joked that his only disagreement was when Trump told the press Warsh didn't look like he was out of central casting.
Oh, man. So he refused to draw a definitive line in the sand.
He really did.
And this signals a fundamental shift in the relationship between the central bank and political power. But, the questions about who Kevin Warsh answers to, they do not stop at the gates of the White House.
No, they don't.
Oh, right.
The paper trail leads straight back to Wall Street.
Right. And the sheer scale of his personal wealth became probably the most explosive part of the Senate hearings. Let's talk about the money.
The complexity of his financial portfolio is just staggering. According to his federal ethics reports, Kevin Warsh holds over $100 million in completely undisclosed assets.
Over $100 million.
Yes. And these funds are not sitting in some, Vanguard index fund or a standard savings account.
Right.
The wealth is fragmented across more than 60 different, highly opaque financial entities.
We are looking at entities like the Juggernaut Fund and dozens of limited liability companies with deeply obscured names. I mean, we are talking about THS DFS LLC Series 1 all the way through Series 72.
Yeah, it's very hidden. But we do know the central hub for these assets. They are heavily tied to the Duquesne family office.
Managed by billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller.
Exactly. And Warsh operates in a very tight orbit with this firm. He earned $10.2 million last year alone just acting as an advisor for them.
So $10.2 million in 1 year. But break down the term family office for the listener. Why is that crucial here?
Well, a family office is a private wealth management advisory firm. It serves ultra-high net worth investors.
Okay.
So unlike a traditional mutual fund or a hedge fund that takes money from outside investors, a family office only manages the wealth of one specific family or a very small group.
Oh, I see.
And because they do not solicit public funds, they are exempt from most of these strict registration and disclosure requirements enforced by the SEC.
So they operate in a regulatory dark room.
Exactly. A total dark room.
But, plenty of government officials come from lucrative Wall Street backgrounds.
Yeah.
Wealth itself isn't a disqualifier.
No, it's not.
The uproar in the Senate Banking Committee stems from two specific anti-corruption laws. First, you have the Federal Reserve Act,
Right.
which strictly and legally forbids any Fed board member from holding stock in any bank, banking institution, or trust company.
And the logic there is bulletproof. I mean, you cannot regulate the banking sector. Yeah, that legislation was enacted in 1978, directly in the wake of the Nixon-Watergate scandal.
As a mechanism to restore public trust.
Right. It mandates that high-level federal nominees fully disclose their financial assets so the government can actually verify the absence of conflicts of interest.
But Warsh is refusing to reveal the underlying assets inside those 60 different LLCs.
He is. He is citing pre-existing confidentiality agreements. He basically argues that he is legally bound by contract, and he literally cannot tell the Senate what stocks, bonds, or equity those funds actually hold.
Wait, if he flatly refuses to disclose the contents of the funds, how does the Senate know he isn't secretly holding massive stakes in JP Morgan or Bank of America?
They don't. They absolutely do not know. And that is the glaring blind spot lawmakers are highlighting. Without transparency, the Senate cannot verify his compliance with the Federal Reserve Act.
And the concern isn't purely theoretical either. Public SEC filings reveal that the Juggernaut Fund, which is one of the few entities we can actually partially track and that Warsh is invested in, has recently held financial interests in Berkshire Bank and Investor Bank.
Grace.
But I've challenged the outrage here for a second. Warsh signed an official ethics agreement, right?
He did.
He legally committed to divesting these assets before taking power. If he promised to sell everything and cash out, doesn't that solve the conflict of interest? Why are lawmakers treating the divestment itself as a scandal?
Because selling shares in a private, opaque LLC series is fundamentally different from opening an E-Trade account and selling shares of Apple.
Okay, how so?
You cannot sell these assets on the open public market. They are highly illiquid. You have to find a specific private buyer who is willing to purchase your bespoke shares in, THS DFS LLC Series 72.
Oh, right.
And Warsh is refusing to disclose the identity of the buyers purchasing his $100 million portfolio.
Nope.
Nor will he disclose the valuation price of the sale.
So that exposes a massive mechanical loophole.
Huge.
Because if I own an illiquid private asset that is theoretically worth $100 million, and a private buyer anonymously takes it off my hands for $150 million, that extra $50 million premium is essentially an untraceable windfall.
Yes. And Senator Warren articulated that exact fear. The secretive nature of this private buyout creates an environment ripe for unseen influence.
So lawmakers are terrified that a private equity firm or a massive banking entity, someone who stands to make billions of dollars off of the Federal Reserve's future interest rate decisions, could just be the anonymous buyer overpaying for Warsh's assets right before he assumes control of the economy.
Exactly. And the friction escalated to the point where Senator Warren bypassed Warsh entirely. She wrote a formal letter directly to billionaire Stanley Druckenmiller.
Wow.
Yeah, demanding that he voluntarily release Warsh from the non-disclosure agreements so the American public can verify the source of the funds.
So we have a nominee promising to maintain economic independence while simultaneously refusing to show his financial homework or name the people buying his portfolio.
Yeah, it's a tense situation.
But the scrutiny on Warsh didn't stop at what he currently owns. Lawmakers dug aggressively into his consulting history.
They really went digging.
Since 2011, Warsh has worked as a consultant for GoldenTree Asset Management. This is a major hedge fund deeply entangled in one of the most devastating financial crises of the last decade, the bankruptcy of Puerto Rico.
Right. GoldenTree held more than $850 million in distressed Puerto Rican debt.
Explain the mechanics of distressed debt investing for us, because it's highly controversial.
It is. So a firm purchases the bonds of a struggling municipality or territory for pennies on the dollar, capitalizing on the market's assumption that the territory will default.
Okay.
The firm then utilizes aggressive litigation to force the territory to pay back the bonds at their full original face value, regardless of the economic devastation happening on the ground.
And GoldenTree wasn't just passively holding this debt. They were playing the classic distressed debt playbook.
Yeah.
Lawmakers openly referred to GoldenTree as an optimistic vulture. They accused the firm of deliberately sabotaging debt restructuring negotiations that were designed to provide relief to the people of Puerto Rico.
Right, opting instead to just maximize their own profit margins during a humanitarian and economic crisis.
So during the Senate hearings, lawmakers demanded clarity on Warsh's specific role. They wanted to know if the man about to control the U.S. monetary supply actively advised this vulture fund on how to squeeze Puerto Rico.
And Warsh provided a heavily insulated answer to that. He claimed he did not advise them on specific bond purchases. He stated his role was limited to providing general commentary on macroeconomic trends.
So he is claiming he only provided the 30,000-foot view of the global economy, completely separated from the tactical decisions of bleeding a bankrupt territory.
That's his claim, yeah.
But the scrutiny regarding his time at GoldenTree took a much darker turn. And this brings us to the most volatile exchange in the entire confirmation document.
Yeah, this part is heavy. Lawmakers introduced a 2018 internal email from Deutsche Bank.
Right.
This communication flagged a specific satellite office of GoldenTree as a, quote, high-risk account.
And the reason for the flag.
The email explicitly linked the account to a Southern financial/Epstein relationship.
Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier.
Yes. The Senate Banking Committee took this flag seriously enough to formally submit written questions to Warsh regarding his and his family's appearances in the publicly available Epstein files.
Now, gift by association is a treacherous game in Washington.
It definitely is.
Just because Warsh consulted for a massive asset management firm that had a single satellite office flagged in a banking email does not mean he was flying to private islands. Did lawmakers present any actual proof linking Warsh to Epstein?
None. There was no hard evidence presented of a relationship, and Warsh's pushback was absolute.
Right.
He stated unequivocally under oath that he did not know Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. He denied any personal, social, or financial connections to them whatsoever.
Okay.
He clarified that his family never attended their events. Furthermore, he explicitly stated that he had zero contact with Epstein's business ventures or the flagged satellite office during his tenure consulting for GoldenTree.
So he shut the accusation down completely.
Completely.
But he also had to provide written answers regarding whether he attended specific gatherings in St. Barth's back in 2010. I mean, the fact that a Federal Reserve confirmation hearing devolved into demanding sworn statements about Jeffrey Epstein demonstrates the sheer level of distrust and hostility surrounding this entire process.
It really does. If we pull back and synthesize all of these data points, a clear picture emerges of an institution undergoing a seismic transformation. Because for decades, the Federal Reserve has operated under an unwritten but strictly enforced code. Total independence from the political whims of the White House, combined with total verifiable transparency regarding the personal finances of its board members.
And the goal there was to guarantee to the markets and the public that the cost of borrowing money was dictated purely by mathematical data, not political polls or personal portfolios.
But Kevin Warsh is dismantling that framework. He is introducing a massive, tangled web of private Wall Street wealth that he refuses to open to public scrutiny, shielding himself with private contracts.
Right.
And simultaneously, he is rolling out this philosophy of bifurcated independence, promising to keep the math of interest rates separate from politics while actively inviting the White House to influence how the major banks are regulated.
And the broader implications for you, the listener, are profound. The Federal Reserve dictates the reality of your daily financial life. They control the trajectory of your mortgage rates, the compounding interest on your credit card debt, and the inflation that silently erodes your purchasing power at the grocery store.
Yeah. When the traditional walls that protect the central bank begin to shift, the entire economy feels the tremor.
Ultimately, the Senate banking documents and the market data point to a crisis of faith. The Senate just handed the keys of the American economy to a leader who essentially says, trust me to be independent, but do not look at my private bank accounts, do not ask who is buying my assets, and do not expect me to criticize the president.
And the sharp dive in the stock market we discussed at the beginning of the show proves that Wall Street's trust is incredibly fragile right now. Markets rely on predictability. When economic data demands one course of action and political pressure demands the opposite, the system fractures.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We talked earlier about Warsh being the referee who wants to control the whistle while letting the owners rewrite the rule book on fouls. What happens when the game is tied in the final seconds? If inflation stays red hot and the cold hard economic data screams that interest rates absolutely must go up to stabilize the dollar, but the President of the United States gets on television and demands that they go down to boost the markets, will Kevin Warsh's promise of bifurcated independence actually hold up under the immense weight of the Oval Office? Or will the line between political survival and your personal wallet vanish completely? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.